Ladies and gentlemen, you didn't click this video by accident. Let me repeat that so it lands. You didn't choose this moment. This moment chose you. And before we continue, I need you to fully grasp what that means. The fact that you're hearing my voice right now at this exact point in your life isn't random. It isn't coincidence. It isn't luck, fate, or some mysterious algorithm. This is alignment. This is timing. This is your future self tapping you on the shoulder. That future version of you. The one who's already living the life you dream about. The one who already crossed the finish line. You are still approaching. Sent a signal back through possibility, through intuition, through the field that connects everything. And that signal reached you now because you're close. Closer than you've ever been. So close that the potential of who you're becoming is beginning to affect your physical reality. So close that your nervous system is adjusting, recalibrating, preparing for a version of life your mind is only just beginning to understand. The old identity, the one built on survival, fear, hesitation, and doubt, can feel itself fading. It's resisting, but it's losing. Underneath all the confusion, the fatigue, the uncertainty, you can feel something shifting. That subtle vibration, that pull, that barely explainable knowing that something in you is changing. You may not have the language for it, but you can't deny it's happening. It's always been there softly in the background, and now it's becoming undeniable because the universe just raised the volume. So, let's get real about what's happening to you. You're exhausted, but not in a way sleep fixes. You're drained because you're existing in two realities at once. One part of you is still tied to who you've been, while another part is already stepping into your becoming. And that internal split takes energy, massive energy. This is the part no one explains. The part no inspirational speaker, no seminar, no self-help book truly prepares you for. When you are right on the edge of transformation, your entire internal system goes into upheaval. Your biology begins reorganizing itself. Your brain is pruning outdated neural connections and constructing new ones. Your heart is generating electromagnetic field than it was months ago. You are literally rewiring into a new version of yourself, and the outdated version is dissolving. That's why you feel restless. That's why you feel overwhelmed. That's why you wake up at 2 or 3 a.m. wondering why. Your thoughts are loud and your soul feels restless. You are not falling apart. You are being rebuilt, and like birth right before the breakthrough, it becomes nearly unbearable. The pressure intensifies, the discomfort peaks. And there is always that one moment where part of you thinks, I can't do this. Where the urge to retreat is strong, but you can't go back because the shift has already begun. The change is already in motion. The life you're stepping into is already forming. Your future is approaching whether you're ready or not. Right now, your job isn't to push harder or force anything. Your role is to breathe, to stay present, to trust that your body, your intuition, your inner intelligence already knows what it's doing. Your mind is the one that's catching up. Those dreams that feel too outrageous, too large, too unlikely. They're not fantasies. They are maps. They are instructions. They are communications from the version of you that already exists in another timeline, calling you into alignment. Those middle-of-the-night ideas, those persistent urges to change your environment, choose differently, walk away, upgrade your life. Those are not intrusions. They are invitations. You feel intensity because the two timelines, the one you've lived and the one you're stepping into, are beginning to overlap. And when timelines merge, clarity becomes unavoidable. That's why the job you once tolerated now feel suffocating. That's why relationships you once excused now feel misaligned. That's why when you look at yourself, you sense someone unfamiliar, someone becoming. Because you are no longer the person you once were. You are in the space between identity and destiny, the threshold between ending and emergence. And here's the truth no one prepares you for. When you're this close, everything inside you rises to test you, not to stop you, but to see if you're finally ready to live the life waiting on the other side. The closer you move toward the breakthrough, the louder the old identity becomes because it senses what's coming. It recognizes that its time is almost up, and it will use every strategy, every illusion, every emotional trick it has to cling to existence. It will plant doubt in moments where you finally felt sure. It will stir up unnecessary chaos just to distract you. It will try to pull you back toward old habits, familiar relationships, outdated patterns, anything that keeps you anchored to who you used to be. Because to the old self, remaining in a familiar struggle feels safer than stepping into an unfamiliar expansion. It would rather live in a predictable discomfort than risk stepping into an unknown possibility. That older version of you has been sitting in that discomfort for so long that it convinced itself that was normal, that it was home. But the truth is, it's not confidence holding it in place. It's fear. And that version of you, the one that doubts, questions, shrinks, and calls avoidance humility, only exists because you continue to energize it. It only feels real because you keep choosing its thoughts, reacting to its emotions, repeating its behaviors. The moment you stop participating, it collapses, not slowly, instantly, like a quantum wave collapsing into form, only when observed. The old identity is nothing more than a possibility you've been repeatedly solidifying through habit. But you're reaching the point where the pattern is about to break and you can feel it. More importantly, a deeper part of you knows. That's why you're hearing this now. That's why this message didn't miss you. Because somewhere in your physiology, in the intelligence of your cells, in the circuitry of your nervous system, the next version of you is already activated, waiting for you to stop reviving the one that's fading. Before we fully dive in, I just ask for one small thing. If you can take a second to like or hype the video, it really helps to reach more people who might need these words today. Thank you. Every transformation requires a letting go. Every rebirth begins with something ending. And you've been sensing the ending, but misinterpreting it as loss. You've been feeling the collapse, but not realizing it's clearing space, the discomfort, the uncertainty, the things falling away, the people exiting, the plans unraveling. None of that is punishment. It's purification. It's shedding. It doesn't cling to its old skin. The butterfly doesn't mourn the cocoon. And you cannot carry an outdated identity into a higher version of your life. It won't fit. The frequency you're moving into is incompatible with who you were. So life in its wisdom is removing what can't continue with you. And yes, it hurts. Yes, it feels confusing. Yes, there are moments where you look at your life and think, why does everything feel like it's dismantling? But this is exactly how evolution feels from the inside. Because you're not just changing circumstances, you're shifting your entire internal operating system. The version of you that exists on the other side of this doesn't hope, doesn't question, doesn't wait for permission. That version embodies certainty. That version lives in the energetic state of already arrived. And when you operate from that frequency, reality adjusts to match you. But here's the part that most people never make it through. You cannot build the next version of yourself on top of the old one. You cannot layer confidence over insecurity and expect self-rust. You cannot pile abundance onto a mindset wired for scarcity and expect freedom. Transformation isn't about adding. It's about releasing. It's about subtraction. And that process feels terrifying because the old identity is known, comfortable, predictable. Even if it's painful, at least you knew how to exist there. The new identity is unfamiliar territory. It's a frequency you have yet to fully step into. And your brain, designed for survival, not evolution, is sounding alarms. It's pulling memories of past failures as evidence. It's replaying old criticism like a warning siren. It's convinced that letting go of the familiar equals danger. Because the brain's job to make you fulfilled. It's to keep you alive with the least amount of risk and effort. But you didn't come here just to survive. That chapter is over. You're here to expand, to embody, to become. And that means overriding the outdated settings your brain has been running on autopilot. Here's what's occurring inside your nervous system and brain right now. Your mind operates through repetition. It learns by what you consistently think, feel, and do. Every belief you've held, every emotional pattern you've repeated, every behavior you've acted out has carved neurological pathways, almost like circuits that your consciousness travels without effort. The more a pathway is used, the stronger and more automatic it becomes. So, if you've spent years looping thoughts of doubt, experiencing emotions rooted in not enoughness, and taking actions based on fear or avoidance, your brain has built express lanes toward that identity. Meanwhile, the version of you that is confident, capable, empowered, and aligned, that pathway is still faint, fragile, like an unwalked trail hidden beneath weeds. So the moment you attempt to think a different thought, embody a new feeling, or choose a new behavior, your brain resists. It redirects you toward what's familiar, because that's the neural route that feels predictable and safe. And overriding that default requires effort, conscious choice, emotional energy, and intentional repetition. That's why change feels draining. Not because you're failing, but because you're confronting decades of conditioning and rewiring the system from the inside out. Transformation requires consistency, not in the direction of who you were, but in the direction of who you're becoming. New thinking practiced daily. New emotional states rehearsed again and again. New actions taken repeatedly, until the once faint trail becomes the new highway. And the old neural road begins to weaken and dissolve from lack of use. That's the science of neuroplasticity. That's how identity shifts occur. You don't become someone new by wishing or waiting. You evolve by practicing the state of your future self before you have the external proof. And that's the part most people struggle with because it requires faith. Not blind belief, but a deep understanding that life responds to the vibration you generate, not the desperation you project. The universe doesn't align with what you beg for. It aligns with what you embody. And right now, you're in the uncomfortable space between identities. You're no longer fully aligned with who you used to be, but you're not yet fully anchored to who you're becoming. You're in the quantum in between. This is the stage where most people turn back. They grow wary of the contrast, the friction between old programming and new intention. They get exhausted from navigating both timelines. So they collapse into familiarity and tell themselves stories like, I knew it wouldn't work. Or, maybe it just wasn't meant for me. But that story isn't truth. It's the old identity defending itself as it fights extinction. What actually happened is this. You were inches away from alignment. The shift was almost locked in. The frequency match was nearly formed. The momentum was building. And then you reverted to the old emotion, the old belief, the old pattern, and the quantum field merely mirrored that shift back to you, not as rejection, simply as reflection. Because that's how this operates. Reality responds to your energetic signature, not your verbal affirmations. If you affirm abundance while holding the emotional frequency of lack, the field reflects lack. If you visualize success while vibrating fear, the field reflects fear. It's not your words that shape reality, it's your state. And your state is built through what you repeatedly think, feel, and do. Especially in the quiet moments when no one sees, the universe responds to the you beneath the performance. The energetic broadcast your heart sends continuously. And whether you consciously realize it or not, that signal is shifting. The frequency is rising. The way you perceive and engage with reality is changing, and reality is beginning to rearrange to meet you. That's why synchronicities are showing up. That's why you're encountering the same message repeatedly from unexpected places. That's why this video found you right now. You're aligning with a new timeline. But here's the catch. Your old personality is still trying to control the process. It's trying to force the outcome, rush the timing, and intellectually engineer the result. But transformation doesn't respond to impatience. It responds to alignment. You can't accelerate a gestation cycle. You can't rush a seed into a tree. You can't force a quantum leap. You can only prepare for it. Your job is to embody the frequency, create inner coherence, and then let go, trusting the field to do what only it can do. Let the same intelligence that spun galaxies into existence handle the mechanics of your manifestation, because it already knows the route. It knows the timing, the sequence, the unfolding. The how has never been your burden to carry. Your role isn't to strategize every step. Your role is to align, to shift into the frequency of a version of you who already has what you're calling in. When you embody that version, fully emotionally, energetically, physically, your current reality has no choice but to dissolve and restructure itself to match that new broadcast. And here's the wild, exhilarating, almost unbelievable truth. You're right at the threshold. You are so close that the future version of you is beginning to bleed into your present awareness. You're so close that the old timeline is breaking apart and the new one is forming in real time. You're so close that the universe is already rearranging circumstances, people, and events to align with the identity you've been stepping into. But there's something happening inside you, not mentally, but biologically, and you haven't fully recognized it yet. There's a shift occurring beneath consciousness, a recalibration so deep it's almost invisible, unless you know where to look. And understanding it will change how you move forward from this moment. Because if you're about to cross into the reality you've been building, you need to understand the vessel that's carrying you there, your body. And believe me when I say your body has been preparing for this expansion far longer than your mind has acknowledged. Your body isn't just a mechanical shell. It isn't a biological machine you pilot from somewhere behind your face. That's the illusion society sold you. In truth, your body is an electromagnetic field, a living broadcasting system that projects a current signal into the quantum fabric of reality every second. And that signal, that vibration, isn't coming from your thoughts, it's coming from your heart. Let me ground this in science before we go deeper. The heart generates an electromagnetic field of 5,000 times stronger than the one produced by your brain. 5,000 times. And that field extends roughly 8 to 10 beyond your physical body in every direction, interacting with people, environments, and energetic systems long before words are exchanged. That field carries information, not about who you pretend to be, not about who you're trying to become, but about who you truly are at the level of emotional identity and energetic state. And the universe, this intelligent, responsive, holographic field we live inside, doesn't respond to language. It responds to resonance. It responds to signal. It mirrors whatever your heart is, broadcasting with precision. So if your emotional baseline is rooted in not enough, if you're operating from lack, separation, or longing, life reflects that frequency back, not as punishment, but as alignment. Reality is a neutral mirror, a compassionate, exact feedback system, giving you not what you want, but what you are, energetically. And here's why this matters right now. Your signal is shifting. I know it because you're still here. Something in you knows this message isn't entertainment. It's recognition. Beneath the fear, beneath the fatigue, beneath the doubt, there's a quiet vibration rising. A resonance that feels less like hope and more like certainty. It feels like a memory of something that hasn't happened yet but already exists. That sensation, that pull, that calm, inner yes that isn't imagination. It's coherence with your future self. This isn't wishful thinking. It isn't someday energy. It's the bleed-through of a timeline where you've already succeeded. It's the future version of you, the one living in alignment, abundance, confidence, peace, reaching back and activating your biology. Because what most people don't know is this. The heart isn't just a pump. It perceives, it stores memory. It processes intuition before the brain does. The heart contains its own neural structure, neurons, neurotransmitters, circuitry. A miniature brain that sends more signals upward to your head than the brain sends downward. Your heart is instructing your mind right now, and the message is unmistakably clear. We're ready. The body is ready. The energy is ready. The field is ready. Stop trying to think your way into your future and begin feeling yourself into alignment with it. Because thoughts alone do not create your reality. Thoughts fused with elevated emotion do. That union, intention plus embodiment, is what collapses potential into physical form. That's the mechanism. That's the chemistry. That is the bridge between possibility and manifestation. You imagine the future version of yourself, and you generate the emotion as if it has already unfolded. When the thought of the future and the feeling of the future synchronize, when the mind and heart send the same frequency, you create a brand new energetic identity, one the field has never received from you before. And when that coherent broadcast goes out, the field adjusts and begins returning circumstances, people, and opportunities that match that new energetic blueprint. But this is where most people fall apart. Not because they aren't capable, but because they attempt to force a feeling they haven't earned yet. They try to feel grateful while still anchored in lack. They try to feel abundant while staring at overdue bills. They try to embody victory while still identifying with struggle, and it doesn't land because the nervous system doesn't buy it. The body knows the truth. It remembers every season of fear. It remembers operating in survival mode. It remembers the constant stress hormones, the hypervigilance, the internal alarms. So when you sit down and try to feel wealthy or free or safe, the body rejects it. Not because you're incapable, but because you're trying to bypass a necessary step. You cannot leap from contraction to expansion without processing what's in between. You have to allow the old emotional programs to move. The stored memories of not enough, the tension you've carried in your bones, the frustration, the despair, the years of waiting, that all exists in your tissues, in the fascia, in the cellular memory that's meant to hold your next evolution. And until that stored emotional energy is released, you're trying to transmit a new frequency through static. So, how do you clear it? Through presence, through breath, through the willingness to sit with uncomfortable feelings without running, numbing, intellectualizing, or turning them into a story about your inadequacy. You allow the emotion to exist without becoming it. You feel it without collapsing into it. You let the wave rise crest, and because all emotional energy wants is movement. And the only way forward is through. On the other side of that release, on the other side of finally letting yourself feel what you've spent years avoiding, there is space. Clean, open, coherent space. And in that space, the elevated emotions can finally land. Gratitude becomes genuine rather than forced. Abundance becomes embodied rather than imagined. And your heart begins to emit a frequency so consistent, so aligned, so unmistakably true that the universe must respond because resonance recognizes itself. But the process requires honesty. You must be willing to look at the version of yourself who lived in fear, contraction, and survival. Not to judge them, not to regret them, but to acknowledge them with compassion. You say this was the identity I operated from because I didn't know there was another option. These beliefs and emotions were the product of my past, not the truth of who I am. That acknowledgement is the death of the old self. And yes, it's messy. It's not glamorous. It doesn't look like motivation, perfection, or confidence. It looks like shedding. It looks like letting go. It looks like falling apart, only to realize you're falling forward. And in that raw, vulnerable opening, something powerful emerges. The authentic you. The version untouched by programming, untouched by conditioning, untouched by the stories you were given about worth, identity, or possibility. The version that exists without needing to prove, earn, achieve, or justify anything. The version that simply is. And from that state, not striving, not chasing, not reaching, but being, everything begins to shift. Because at that point, you're not working toward the life you want. You're embodying the frequency of the life that is already yours and potential. You're no longer asking life to give you something. You're aligning with what's already available in the field. And this, right here, is the turning point most people never reach. The moment you stop trying to become and instead claim the identity of already being. When you embody that state fully, emotionally, your reality reorganizes instantly. Not next month, not someday. In the exact moment your internal state shifts, you drop into a new timeline. The quantum field responds to that new broadcast, and life begins delivering people, synchronicities, and opportunities that match your new frequency. Because now finally you're aligned with the version of yourself who was waiting on the other side. It won't happen because you got lucky or because you tried harder than everyone else. It happens because you shifted your frequency. You became a new signal, and the universe simply responded the way it always does, through resonance. But here's the part most people never move through. The part that separates those who transform from those who repeat the same life over and over. You have to maintain the frequency. You can't step into that elevated state for a few minutes during meditation and then slip right back into the old identity for the rest of the day. You have to remain there. Think from that identity. Act from that identity consistently, especially when physical reality hasn't rearranged yet. Even when nothing looks different. Even when the numbers haven't changed. The relationship hasn't shifted. The environment still reflects the past. Like you must hold the state because in those moments, it can feel like the universe is testing you. And in a way it is not as punishment, but as confirmation. The field wants to know, is this your true identity now, or just a temporary performance? Are you embodying a new frequency, or only visiting it when it's convenient? And this is where most people collapse. They'll meditate, feel expansive, aligned, abundant, and then life happens. Someone irritates them. An email brings old anxiety. A memory gets triggered, and instantly they fall back into old emotions, old stories, old wiring. And the field reflects that shift immediately, not as rejection but as clarity. So, this is still who you believe you are. The delay isn't failure. It's a mismatch. It's an identity oscillating between past and future. And the universe cannot deliver to inconsistency. The signal must stabilize. Your job now is singular. Become the frequency and hold it. Stop bargaining with past habits. Stop letting circumstances dictate your inner state. Stop outsourcing your emotional stability to outcomes, timelines, or approval. Instead, live as the version of yourself who has already arrived. Let it inform your decisions, your tone, your posture, your reactions. Not as a performance, not as forced optimism, but because it feels true now. Because at your core, you're not preparing for victory. You're remembering victory. The version of you who already succeeded isn't hypothetical. They exist now in the quantum field, fully formed and complete. And what you are doing is choosing them, choosing that frequency, choosing that reality again, until it becomes your only truth. And the moment you fully choose without hesitation, without waiting for proof, without slipping back to the familiar, reality reorganizes, because the laws don't bend for belief. They mirror it. Energy always comes before physical form. Frequency always leads matter. Who you are, not who you say you are, not who you hope to be, not who you perform as, determines what shows up. And unknowingly, you've been doing it backwards. You've been waiting for the evidence before giving yourself permission to feel certainty. Waiting for the results before feeling accomplished. Waiting for the love before allowing yourself to be open. But reality responds to emotion, not expectation. So you must feel it first, independent of the external world. You must generate the emotion of the fulfilled desire from within until your body is saturated with it, until it becomes your baseline chemistry. And once that happens, the external hologram begins to shift because it has to. It can't resist resonance. That is how the game works. And right now, you are on the verge of mastering it. But there is one final initiation. You must release the identity that can't come with you. The version of you who needed permission, who hesitated, who shrank to make others comfortable, who waited for signs before believing. That chapter is finished. And you don't dismiss that identity with anger. You thank it because it protected you. It navigated survival. It carried you to this edge. But survival is no longer the assignment. Expansion is. And expansion requires stepping into unfamiliar territory. It requires broadcasting a frequency you've never embodied before. It requires trusting what you feel more than what you see. Trusting the unfolding, even when logic can't explain it. It requires surrender to a process bigger than your fears and more intelligent than your doubt. And in that surrender, the future you've been sensing, the one already formed in the field, finally becomes the life you're living. This is the initiation, and you're standing in the center of it right now. The old identity isn't going quietly. It's clawing, yelling, trying to drag you backward. It's replaying old failures like evidence. It's whispering doubt in your ear. It's making you question your path, your timing, your worth. Because it senses the truth. Its time is running out. And that inner resistance you're feeling isn't proof that you're off track. It's confirmation that you're finally on it. The old self only fights this fiercely when it knows its influence is slipping. When you were fully aligned with your old patterns, there was no need for resistance. You were already choosing them without effort. But now you're choosing differently. Now you're stepping into a higher identity, a new frequency. And the old programming is terrified because if you follow through, it dissolves instantly. Not gradually, not immediately and entirely. So it's using everything in its arsenal. Fear, sabotage, temptation, distraction, emotional flashbacks, familiar relationships with outdated dynamics, looping thoughts, anything that might keep you from stepping in to the version of yourself you've been evolving toward. But something inside you is different now, isn't it? You can feel it. The old patterns don't grip you the way they once did. The old stories don't feel believable anymore. The emotions that used to control you now feel distant, weaker, like echoes instead of reality. And in that space, that powerful gap between and who you're becoming, a choice emerges, the most defining choice of your lifetime. Do you retreat into familiarity? Or do you let that old identity finally die? And if you choose to release it fully, here's what happens. The void appears. Your narratives, your labels, your wounds, your identity built around struggle or scarcity, or being the one who never quite arrives, all of it dissolves. For a moment, you are no one and nothing. There's no story to hold on to, no emotional root to lean against, no familiar reality to reference, just spaciousness, vast, silent, undefinable. And yes, it feels unsettling. It feels disorienting. It feels like free fall. Most people cannot tolerate that emptiness. They panic. They cling to the past identity like a life raft, even though it's sinking, not because it's better, but because it's familiar. Because being someone and even someone in pain feels safer than being undefined. But you're doing something different this time. You're staying. You're allowing the unknown. You're letting the old self burn away without rushing to rebuild. And that takes courage most will never understand, because that emptiness you're sitting in, it's not nothing. It's pure possibility. The void is the birthplace of every timeline. It's the raw field of unmanifest reality. And if you can remain there without grasping, without panicking, without collapsing back into the old identity, then something extraordinary begins to happen. Because the void isn't silent. It's creative. It's alive with intelligence. And when you stop trying to control, fix, predict, or force, you finally make room for that intelligence to move. You're no longer collapsing the future through fear or impatience. You're no longer blocking the manifestation with doubt or urgency. You're simply available. And in that openness, the universe begins assembling. Everything that matches who you've been becoming, not what you've been desperately asking for. Because here's the truth people misunderstand. Reality does not respond to your wishes. It responds to your identity. The universe doesn't give you what you want. It gives you what you are. Or if you've been trying to manifest from the emotional frequency of lack, fear, separation, or unworthiness, the field reflects that not as punishment, but as resonance, as a mirror showing you what you're emitting. But something is shifting now. You can feel it. Subtle, but undeniable. Alignment is speeding up. Answers are arriving before you've informed the question. Conversations feel divinely timed. Doors are opening effortlessly. The kinds of doors you used to think required force, or luck, or struggle. And maybe until now you've dismissed these moments. You've told yourself, that wasn't it. That wasn't the breakthrough. That wasn't the result I'm waiting on. But what if you're wrong? What if those small signs aren't coincidences, but confirmations? What if the universe is already speaking in the language of arrival? What if the universe isn't withholding anything? What if it's checking whether you can recognize alignment when it arrives in a form your old identity wouldn't have understood? What if the opportunity you've been asking for is already here? But because it doesn't resemble your expectations, you're overlooking it. Because when your frequency shifts, the way your future shows up shifts, too. The opportunities that appear aren't the ones the old version of you would have pursued. They're invitations only the evolved version of you can see, feel, and respond to. They require intuition instead of logic, trust instead of control, courage instead of certainty. The former version of you would have hesitated, asked for more validation, waited until it felt safe. But the you that's emerging, the one who sat in the void, held the discomfort, rewired their inner world. That version recognizes resonance instantly. They don't need the full blueprint because they trust the intelligence of the field. They know that if they are aligned with their future self, the next step will reveal itself right on time. Not all at once, but piece by piece, moment by moment. And that's how the shift happens, not through force or intensity, but through one aligned yes at a time. One intuitive decision. One moment where you choose expansion over fear. One moment where you follow the frequency instead of familiar patterns. Because right now, your body is learning the difference between alignment and familiarity. And that's a skill you've never truly practiced before. For most of your life, you've chosen what was recognizable. Recognizable relationships, recognizable emotional responses, recognizable pain. Even if the familiar kept you limited, even if it drained you, even if it sabotaged your potential, it felt safe because your nervous system knew how to exist inside it. But that's changing now. You're teaching your body that the unknown isn't a threat. It's creation in progress. And the longer you remain in that unfamiliar space without collapsing back into fear, the more your nervous system adapts. It begins to soften, to trust, to open. And when your body feels safe, truly safe, everything inside you begins to shift. The chemistry switches, the survival hormones, cortisol, adrenaline, stress signals begin to fall away. And instead, your system starts producing the chemistry of expansion, dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, the biochemistry of connection, creativity, and possibility. And that internal state, not thoughts alone, is what broadcasts the electromagnetic signature of your future. You can analyze, visualize, affirm, and journal forever. But if you don't feel it in your body, the field won't respond. You must think your way there. Not think your way there. And not just for a few minutes, but throughout the day, through every decision, every reaction, every conversation, where you have the option to fall back into the old emotion or embody the new frequency. That is the real practice, and it's happening already. Your cells are integrating new information. Your heart is transmitting a new coherent field. Your aura is expanding into territories you've never stepped into before. And the universe is aligning in response, shifting timelines, arranging synchronicities, setting events in motion long before you're aware of them. But now comes the pivotal moment, the moment that determines whether you cross into the new reality or repeat the old one. The universe will present you with the familiar, the old pattern, the old trigger, the old dynamic, and it will feel comfortable, justified, predictable. Someone may trigger your old reaction, and your mind will feel entitled to respond. An offer may appear that looks like success, but feels misaligned. A relationship or environment may ask you to shrink again, to play the old role, so others don't have to grow. And in that moment, you will face the choice that determines the timeline you activate. Do you return to what you know, or remain loyal to the frequency you've become? Because you cannot be the new version of yourself while entertaining the emotional habits of the old one. You cannot exist at a higher vibration while still keeping agreements that belong to a former identity. Something must be released. And often it is the connection, the environment, or the pattern that cannot grow with you. Not always, but often enough that you need to recognize it when it comes. Because when your internal state shifts, the energy around you shifts with it, and everyone in your life responds to that change. Some will rise and evolve alongside you, and will reveal where they truly stand. The people who benefited from your uncertainty, your softness, your smallness, not because they were malicious, but because it made their world predictable, will feel threatened by your expansion. Your new frequency disrupts their equilibrium. It highlights their dormant potential, their unlived dreams, their avoided growth. And if they're not ready to face those truths, your transformation becomes uncomfortable for them. So they'll pull, not always aggressively, sometimes subtly. They'll make comments about how you've changed. They'll remind you of your past. They'll challenge your new boundaries, your new standards, your new alignment. And it may sting, especially when those voices belong to people you've cared for deeply, people who walked with you through struggles, people who mattered. But love doesn't require you to shrink, and loyalty doesn't require you to stay in places you've outgrown. You can honor the history without sacrificing the future. You can appreciate what those relationships meant without forcing them into the next version of your life. Transformation isn't just inner work, it's relational evolution. And one of the hardest parts is watching certain people fade. Not because you're abandoning them, but because your paths are diverging. The places that once felt like home may begin to feel tight, heavy, too small for who you're becoming. And yes, some people will no longer recognize you. But that isn't a loss. That's proof of growth. You are not leaving anyone behind. You're stepping into alignment. And alignment requires spaciousness. It demands clarity. It asks you to protect your energy like it is sacred, because it is the life you're stepping into cannot coexist with the patterns and environments of the past. The frequency you're cultivating requires new environments, new conversations, new boundaries, new resonance. And if you try to keep one foot in the old world while reaching toward the new one, you'll split yourself. You'll feel torn, confused, unstable, and eventually you'll have to choose. Most choose the past because it's comfortable, predictable, familiar. But you're not most. If you were, you wouldn't still be here reading this. You're here because you've already chosen the new reality. Even if the physical evidence hasn't caught up yet, something in you already committed. Something in you already crossed the threshold. And now comes the next stage, the testing ground. Not a punishment, a calibration. The universe you with something that looks like the answer. It will resemble the desire, the goal, the outcome. But wrapped in a form your logical mind doesn't fully understand. And in that moment, you will be asked to trust the frequency, rather than the familiarity to move without a guarantee. To say yes when there's no safety net. To choose alignment over logic. This is the final initiation. The point where the old you and the new you stand face to face. If you choose from identity rather than fear, everything unlocks. Not because the universe is rewarding blind faith, but because you demonstrate energetic congruence. You show the field that you're no longer visiting the new frequency. You live there. And when your signal stabilizes, reality rearranges. Opportunities appear where none existed before. People arrive who match your new resonance. Support flows in ways you couldn't script. Not because of luck, but because your frequency shifted and the field reorganized around it. That is manifestation. That is quantum alignment. It's not about wanting. It's about becoming the vibrational match. But here's the truth most people never hear. When the manifestation arrives, it won't feel exactly like the fantasy version you rehearsed. You've imagined it so vividly, prepared emotionally for the moment, rehearsed who you'd be and how you'd celebrate. But when it arrives, the experience feels different, not smaller, just transformed. Because you are different. The person who receives a manifestation isn't the same person who asked for it. You've evolved into someone who doesn't need the outcome to feel whole. Someone who realizes the real victory was becoming the version of yourself capable of receiving it. Someone who is already whole, already overflowing, already aligned with abundance and victor. That's who you've become. So when the external evidence finally shows up, it doesn't feel like the life-altering breakthrough you once imagined. Instead, it feels like recognition. Like the universe gently saying, yes, you were right about yourself. Here's the physical proof of who you became. And at first, that neutrality may confuse you. Part of you might think, wait, this is what I spent years longing for. But that reaction is the clearest indicator that you evolved correctly. Because if receiving the results still felt monumental, dramatic, or necessary for your self-worth, it would mean you still needed it to feel complete. But when the manifestation feels natural, expected, almost obvious, that's when you know the shift happened at the deepest level. Because now the outcome matches the identity, not the desire. Now the external is simply syncing with the internal. That's mastery, creating from fullness instead of lack. You're right on the edge of that state. The fears that once stopped you barely register now. The doubts that once echoed loudly feel foreign, distant, like someone else's voice. Even when challenges arise, even when the universe gives you a final chance to revert to the familiar, you don't collapse. You don't shrink because you've experienced the new frequency, even if only in moments. And now the idea of returning to the old version of reality feels impossible. Not because you think you're too good for it, but because it no longer fits. You've evolved past what used to define you. And here's the truth. You're finally ready to accept. You're not waiting to become someone. You already became them. The hesitation, the mask, the proving, gone underneath the fear, the habits, the survival strategies. This version was always there. The one who doesn't seek permission. The one who doesn't need validation. The one who lives from inner truth instead of external measurement. This is the real you. The one that existed before conditioning, before doubt, before the world convinced you to dim yourself. And that version isn't striving anymore. They've already crossed the finish line. The victory wasn't the achievement. The victory was the identity shift. The moment you chose becoming over chasing, embodiment over effort, alignment over struggle, that was the win. Everything else is just the physical, plain calibrating to your new frequency. And now, because the signal is steady, the field is responding stronger, faster, cleaner. What's coming next isn't random, it's resonance. And you're prepared. Not because you mastered everything, but because you dropped the performance. You stopped trying to perfect yourself and instead allowed yourself to simply be. And from that state of authenticity, the universe can finally meet you clearly, not as a reward, but as reflection. Right now in this moment, you are someone standing at the threshold of receiving. Not because you pushed or forced, but because you aligned. You didn't hustle your way here. You became your way here. And now the field has no option except to deliver what matches that identity, because that's how it has always worked. And there's something else and something crucial. You are no longer becoming. Let that sink into your bones. You're not preparing. You're not hoping the internal shift will finally click. You're not waiting to grow into the version of yourself who can hold the life you want. You already are that version. The shift already occurred. Maybe there was no fireworks moment. Maybe it didn't come with a dramatic awakening. Maybe it happened quietly in the pause between breaths when you finally stopped resisting and surrendered to what already wanted to unfold. Your biology knows. Your heart knows. Your energy knows. The only lagging piece is the mind, because the mind still operates on the old rule. I'll believe it when I see it, but that framework is obsolete now. Reality rearranges after belief, not before it. You will see it when you embody it. You will experience it when you stop anticipating the future and start living from it. And that's what's unfolding right now. You're not trying to generate the feeling of someday anymore. You're rooted in presence. You're living as someone who already has what they once desired. Not out of delusion, but out of coherence, gratitude, abundance, certainty, not as a technique, but as your natural emotional climate. And that shift from seeking to being, from future tense to embodied now, is the final click. That's the moment the circuit closes. That's when the quantum field recognizes they're ready. Not ready to receive, but ready because they already are. And when that frequency locks in, manifestation doesn't trickle. It collapses into form instantly, completely. Inevitably, a sudden rearrangement of reality happens around your new energetic state. What you've been waiting for doesn't arrive in fragments. It comes all at once, like a wave that finally reaches shore after building pressure beneath the surface for years. And at first, it may feel unreal. You may find yourself blinking, questioning, wondering, is this really happening? Is this actually mine? Because for so long you lived in the space between wanting and having. For so long you were the one who got close but not quite there. The one who watched breakthroughs happening to others while you remained in preparation mode. But that version of you, the one who waited, hoped, second-guessed, is gone. The version reading this now, the one whose nervous system resonates with these words, isn't waiting anymore. They're embodying. They don't look outward for validation of worth. They carry worth as identity. And from that identity, manifestations aren't miracles. They're inevitabilities. They're simply the external world aligning with a coherent internal signal. Your mind, heart, and behavior are finally broadcast in the same message, the same certainty. This is who I am. This is the reality I operate from. This frequency is my home now. And the universe, neutral, intelligent, responsive mirrors that state back with exact precision, not as a reward, not as a prize, but as reflection. And that reflection is different now because you are different. Your state 6 months ago doesn't match who you are today. Honestly, your state last week even the same, because you've been disciplining yourself in the unseen realm. The quiet work nobody congratulates you for. The early mornings you meditated instead of sleeping. The moments you consciously chose an elevated emotion when the old reaction was begging to take over. The times you walked away from familiar dynamics because you knew they no longer matched your frequency. The days you sat in the discomfort in the void with no clarity and no evidence and still chose to stay aligned. That internal invisible work built the version of you that stands here now. And this version doesn't need applause, permission, reassurance, or proof. They can feel the difference in their nervous system. They can hear it in their inner dialogue. They can see it in the way they respond to situations that once destabilized them. They are not who they were, and they know it. Once you accept that fully, everything becomes less effortful. Not because life suddenly becomes easy, but because you're no longer facing life as the struggle in self. You're meeting it as the integrated self. The one who doesn't crumble when things go sideways. The one who trusts the process even when the physical circumstances don't immediately match the internal shift. That's embodiment, living from the frequency rather than chasing it. And you're already operating from that state. Yes, you may still have fleeting moments where old fear flickers, where doubt tries to resurface, where the mind attempts to negotiate with the past. But those are echoes, not identity. Residual signals from a timeline you no longer belong to. And every time you choose presence over panic, alignment over reaction, intention over habit, those echoes fade until they disappear completely. What remains is presence, clarity, authentic power. Not the power that forces outcomes, controls others, or grasps, but the power that creates the power. That shapes reality. Not with effort, but with alignment. That level of power isn't something you gain. It's something you remember. It's something that was always there beneath the conditioning, beneath the fear, beneath the survival patterns. The difference now is that you're finally directing it consciously. You're no longer manifesting unconsciously from default programming. You're manifesting deliberately, intentionally with coherence between emotion, thought, and action. That's mastery. The ability to generate your reality from alignment rather than reaction. And with it comes responsibility. Because once you operate at this level of consciousness, you are no longer influencing only your own trajectory. Your frequency affects your environment, your relationships, the people who cross your path. You transmit a signal whether you speak or remain silent, and others feel it. They may not have the vocabulary for it, but they respond to it. You have become a frequency carrier, a lighthouse, a transmitter, a field of influence. And now that you know that, everything you create from here forward isn't just for you, it shifts the collective. And now that your frequency has changed, you'll notice the way people respond to you shifts too. Some will feel magnetized toward you, drawn in without fully understanding why. They'll crave proximity to your energy, wanting to learn from you, wanting to feel what you feel, wanting to understand how you've become who you are. And others will pull away. Not because you've wronged them, not because you've become unkind, but because your energy shines a light on the places within them they haven't yet faced. And being seen at that level can be uncomfortable. So they'll distance themselves, criticize you, minimize your growth, or mask their discomfort as concern. And your work is to let them. You cannot dim your light to make others comfortable. And you cannot lower your frequency just to meet someone at a level you've already outgrown. Those days are over. You've spent too much time and energy shedding an identity that no longer serves you to rebuild it just to soothe someone else's insecurities. Your responsibility now is to hold the frequency. Not through force, not through preaching, not by dragging anyone with you, but by embodying the new standard, by existing as evidence, by living so aligned, so anchored, so deeply connected to who you've become that simply being yourself becomes inspiration for those who are ready. Some will admire it, some will resent it. Both reactions are proof of transformation. And as the external catches up, opportunities will begin appearing with uncanny precision. Connections will form, seemingly out of nowhere. Doors will open that once felt bolted shut. Patterns of synchronicity will align so consistently, they'll feel like instruction rather than coincidence. This isn't luck. It's the natural mathematics of resonance. You shifted your vibration and the universe reorganized around the new signal. It's not a mystery. It's alignment. And what's even more powerful is that you no longer need the outcome to feel whole. The manifestation isn't the validation. It's the echo. You already feel complete, worthy, grounded. The external win, that's just the signature, confirming what you already know. You became the person capable of receiving it. But the true victory wasn't the result. It was the moment you chose transformation over familiarity. The moment you sat with discomfort instead of running from it. The moment you trusted without evidence, listened to intuition over fear, and let the old identity dissolve piece by painful piece. That was the real breakthrough. Everything arriving now is simply the universe acknowledging the work you've done in silence. Because what you've been becoming is someone who doesn't just survive life, someone who shapes it. Someone who leads with intention, not reaction. Someone who doesn't hustle, force, or chase, but align, attunes, and magnetizes. Someone who understands that reality bends not through effort, but through frequency. And now the evidence of that truth is arriving, and it won't stop. The momentum is built. The signal is stabilized. The alignment is locked in. And now that you're receiving, here's the part most people never understand. Receiving isn't the conclusion. It's the beginning. Because now you know you've proven it to yourself. The belief that once limited you, the one that whispered, you weren't powerful enough or worthy enough, it's shattered. You've crossed the threshold. And once you realize you can manifest one reality, you realize you can manifest any reality. The question is no longer, can I do this? The new question is, what else is possible? What's the next evolution of me? What comes after this level? What version of myself am I being called to embody next? Because once you've tasted your own creative power, real power, there's no going back to smallness. There's no going back to waiting, hoping, or asking for permission. There's no going back to believing life happens to you. Not when you've lived the truth that life responds to you. Everything shifts. The way you walk into rooms, the way you speak, the way you choose relationships, the way you make decisions. You're no longer seeking direction externally, because you finally located the source of creation, the source of abundance, the source of alignment. And it was never outside you. It has always been inside in your heart, in your cells, in the electromagnetic signature. You broadcast with every emotion, every thought, every breath. You don't wait for the universe anymore. You are the universe expressing itself. You are the source. And once that truth drops from concept to embodied knowing, once it moves from intellectual understanding into the very cells of your body, you become untouchable. Not loud, not forceful, not frantic, but quietly unstoppable. It's the kind of power that doesn't need to announce itself. A grounded presence, a steady certainty. A calm that comes from finally understanding how reality works. Because the law is simple. Energy shapes matter. Vibration comes before form. Who you are internally dictates what shows up externally, always without exception. And you've mastered the identity. You've shifted the vibration. You've aligned your emotional state with the reality you desire. Now the physical world has no choice but to fall in line. Not because you're chosen or lucky, but because you aligned with universal laws, and universal laws respond with precision. You finally realize the external world is simply the delayed reflection of your internal frequency. You now understand manifestation was never about pursuing, forcing, or begging for outcomes. It was about aligning with the version of you who already has them. The universe has never responded to your wishes. It has always responded to your signal. And your signal now, it's the vibration of completion. The energy of someone who has already crossed the finish line. Not someone trying to win, someone who already won. Waiting for physical reality to catch up, which it will, because it must. So here is the invitation. Stop waiting. Stop searching for proof, for reassurance, for the external nod that says, yes, you're on the right timeline. The proof is already here. The resonance you feel in your chest right now. That pull, that recognition, that is the sign. The fact that these words found you at this exact point in your evolution is the confirmation. This is the universe saying, you've crossed the threshold. Now live like it. So live it. Not later, not when it feels safe, not when every detail is mapped. Live it now. Make the decision the future version would make. Say yes to the path that feels aligned. Even if your mind can't explain it, take the action your old self would have avoided. Step into the identity you've been rehearsing internally in the present moment, because that's how the invisible becomes visible. That's how a quantum possibility becomes physical reality. You don't wait for the future. You act from it. You move like the version of you who has already arrived. And when you do that consistently, the external world rearranges around your new signal. People will appear, opportunities will unfold, synchronicities will accelerate, and none of it will feel random because it isn't. It's coherence. It's resonance. It's the universe responding to the frequency you now embody. And the frequency you're radiating right now, it's certainty, it's completion, it's arrival. So stop searching for it outside of you. Stop waiting for validation. Stop asking whether you're ready. You're not waiting to become anything. You already became it. If this message resonated, I am manifesting my new reality and stepping into my higher self. Your comment isn't just text. It's energy, intention, and alignment. The universe delivered the moment your identity shifted. The physical experience is just sinking now. And if you're reading this at this exact moment, it isn't coincidence. Your future self orchestrated this. They reached through the quantum field and guided you to this message as a reminder. You've already won. Not because you forced reality, not because you hustled harder than everyone else, but because you chose alignment. You chose frequency over fear. You chose embodiment over hope. You chose the invisible before the visible. And that was the victory. Everything unfolding, now, that's just the universe catching up. And the acceleration is about to get intense. So when the opportunities pour in, when the aligned people appear, when the doors swing open without effort, don't hesitate. Don't question whether you deserve it. Don't apologize for it. Receive it with calm certainty, the certainty of someone who would come, because it was always meant to. You did the inner work. You tuned your signal. You became the identity, and the universe simply mirrored it back. What you are right now is someone who succeeds. Not later, not eventually, now. So step forward and claim what's already yours. Remember, only you decide how limitless you are. Thank you.